Hello, everybody. Thanks so much for coming out. We're very excited to be here. This is the first time I've been interviewed or been involved in an interview with such young interviewers, so I think this is pretty exciting. And this is a credit to the 100-Story Building because that's what they're all about. The 100-Story Building is all about connecting with young readers, writers, and in particular the early harvest with editors and publishers. So my role at the 100-Story Building, my name is Sally Rippin, and I'm a children's author and illustrator, and I'm also one of the ambassadors for the 100-Story Building, which is an actual building from about 2 years ago. Originally it started as a concept, an idea of helping children sometimes with their homework, sometimes with creative writing. Originally started over in San Francisco with Valencia 826 with Dave Eggers, and has been existing in Melbourne for quite a few years, but the actual building has been existing for 2 years. And the ground level is certainly worth visiting. So the ground level, you go in on the 100-story, and apparently there are 99 stories below. So there's a little trap door in the corner of the building where you can go down, but it's usually blocked off, and there's a notice board at the top where you can check on what's happening in all the other 100 stories. And the thing that they do on the stories that you can enter, which is on the street in Footscray, is that they bring lots of kids in from lots of schools in the area, sometimes to do workshops, sometimes to hear author talks. And occasionally they will come together particularly to work on a project. And the Early Harvest Project is a really exciting idea. This is the 4th year this has been running because it's purely run by children. So students, and there are a lot of very good mentors that are involved as well, but essentially, and you guys are going to tell us a little bit more about this in a little while, you commission the work, you edit the work, you get to choose who's in and out, and once I submitted a story without my name attached, and I was very nervous there for a moment that I might not get in, but I did get in. And then you have this beautiful product at the end of it, which I hope that you'll all get a chance to look at later this evening, because they're for sale at the back. So I'm going to introduce our wonderful speakers for this evening. So we have 2 editors from Early Harvest, and we have Shaun Tan, who has supplied one of the illustrations in the book. So you managed to get in.
I got in.
Were you nervous?
I did have to use my own name.
Did you? Yeah. Sometimes you've got to pull some strings. Yeah. But also we have 2 editors here, and they have fantastic bios that I'm going to read out straight from the book because I couldn't have come up with something as interesting. So to my left, we have Stevie, who says about herself, she's loud. So we're going to see if that's the truth later tonight. She's loud and must have an opinion on everything. Well, that's very good because I do understand that. And add a lot of fireworks, and you have a very cool person. So that's a wonderful. And can we please give Stevie a big hand? Next to Stevie, we have Shaun Tan, who has only once had someone in his sports team shorter than him, which is something that he claims to fame. But he said so that he wasn't considered the shortest in the class, he became very good at drawing. So he then very quickly became the best drawer in the class because he didn't want his identity to be the shortest person in the class. So we all know his drawings. He's published many wonderful books and has had a film, won an Academy Award a few years ago, The Lost Thing, and has gone on to do wonderful things. So really a national treasure. Can we please give Shaun Tan a big applause? We also have Keely. This is Keely's bio, which is equally fascinating. Think of a panda. Then, I'm going to have to put my glasses on, sorry. Think of a panda, then think of a panda that is injury prone. This is basically Keely. She is pro at reading injuries and being a panda. So you're going to do a demonstration of that later on, Keely?
Yes, maybe.
Fantastic, great. Well, I thought we would open up by having a little bit of a look at the magazine. It's beautifully produced. This is the 4th year that it's come out. And maybe I could start by asking one of the editors here. You've got some questions lined up that you want to ask us, but I'd love to know your experience a little bit about working on the magazine. Would you like to start, Keely, would you like to start? Yeah. How did you get the job? Was it easy, or like Shaun, did you have to pull a few strings?
We had to send our teachers gave us a sheet of paper which was an application. Mm-hmm. So we wrote our names and we wrote a little bit about ourselves, like that injury prone panda part.
That got you in. Yep.
Yes. And we wrote why we wanted to be in early harvest because not many young people would get this opportunity.
It's an amazing opportunity. And had you already been involved in the 100-storey building before then?
Yes, I've had my work published in the second magazine, I'm pretty sure.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Great. And how about you? How did you get involved in the magazine this year?
I got in a lucky dip.
Oh, completely random. So how did that happen? Did your teacher organise that, or was that at the 100-storey building they organised that?
My teachers. So my teachers got all of the year 5s and 6s, and then they cut out all of our names, put it into a hat, and picked out 4 of them.
Just 4? Wow, so you're one of the lucky ones. And Shaun, how did you get involved in early harvest?
My teacher wrote my name on it. How did I get involved with...
so were you contacted directly by 100-storey building, or did some of the early harvest team get in touch with you?
Yeah, they just got in touch and said, would you like to contribute? We'll tell you what the theme is later. And I was like, oh, please, dinosaurs. And then they said technology, and I was like, okay, I can work with that. But I found it really hard, actually.
To come up with something?
Yeah. Because I'm a science fiction guy, but strangely the technology theme kind of froze me a little bit, and then I realised I draw heaps of robots, so problem solved.
It's probably why they picked you. And you were saying once, I remember quite a few years ago when we were chatting about your art, that you said your brother is a scientist, and you see a lot of your art as quite similar to science in the sense that it is pulling things apart and studying them and seeing how they fit together, and it was an interesting comparison. So It's interesting, a lot of your characters are technology based in that way.
Yeah, and being an artist, it's often regarded as a bit of a playful sort of soft subject, and my dad's an architect, so I kind of always looked at what he was doing, and which was a strange combination of maths, engineering and art, and I really liked that, the discipline of that, but at the same time I'm more of a story guy. I would have been an architect, except I thought it's really hard to tell a story with a building, unless it's a 100-storey building. It's a little abstract for me, and how could you get a dinosaur into architecture? Or maybe you could, I don't know. It was easier with a book or a story. Yeah. So, I'm still very interested in science. I think there's too much of a gap between the two subjects, the two cultures. And I think that's a bit of a shame. I think there should be more crossover. Yeah.
And Stevie, you've got a couple of questions. Would you like to start with some questions that I know you've prepared some questions, so I'll jump in every now and then, but I can hand it over to you now. What would you like to start by asking?
For who?
Oh, whoever you like. Would you like to ask Shaun something to start with?
Okay. How long does it take for you to draw an illustration?
Sometimes it's very quick, like literally 5 minutes, and you do a little line drawing and it just looks great, and there's everything that you need in there, and you might not have even had to think about it very much. And other times I'll spend 2 weeks on a single picture, and I'll draw it again and again, and then when I move to the final canvas, I'm painting layers and layers and changing my mind and adding bits and pieces, and I might mess around with it digitally afterwards and all sorts of things. So, and then I get to the end of the 2-week period, I look at the picture that took 5 minutes and it's way better, and I pull my hair out. So that's the artistic process for you in a nutshell.
And you do use a lot of mediums, don't you? So you would start maybe with pencil? Is that the freshest, most spontaneous medium for you? Pencil
on A4 copy paper.
Right.
And it's been like that ever since I was a kid.
Yeah.
So, HB pencil, A4 copy paper, and away I go. And then depending on how far I want to develop the image, if I think it's worth it, that is, I find it interesting, then I'll progress to, I'll copy the same image into another medium like oil paint or something like that, and I'll keep going. The drawing in this magazine is pastel drawing, which is almost like somewhere in between where I start working, rare case where I start working on the finished art without much of a plan, just with pastels, because you can rub it out really easily. So I love
and build up the layers.
You can change your mind. It's very important.
And Keely, do you draw, or are you mainly interested in words?
More interesting interested in reading rather than drawing and writing, but I do enjoy drawing, even though I'm not that good at it.
Do you have any questions you'd like to ask Shaun that might give you some ideas
Yes.
about how you can get better at drawing?
Why did you want to become an illustrator/writer?
Oh, why did I want to become an illustrator? Sort of, I didn't at first. I wanted to be a writer. This is a dark secret. I wanted to be a writer, and I would have loved to have like contributed to something like this. You know, when I was your age, if it was around. We did have some things like that at school, but the production. Speaking of technology, the production was a bit limited, so they were photocopied things, you know, stapled together. But you know, we did some nice things. As a teenager, I read a lot of science fiction stories. I was a very nerdy teenager, and I loved the short story form, both science fiction and mainstream, just any kind of short story. And I really wanted to be a writer. And I submitted my work to a lot of magazines, starting at about the age of 15, and they were rejected constantly. I mean, I've got this massive file of rejections, and I kind of liked the rejections, a bit perverse, but it was like contact, you know? Sometimes you get a comment, which was great. They'd say, you know, this is well written, but it's not very original, and I'd be like, okay, well, so all I need is an original idea. You know, the glass is half full. And what happened was, just to cut a long story short, I had this image that all these people are sending stories to magazines and they end up in a slush pile. I mean, that's what it's literally called, a slush pile, which I've pictured as a big pile of paper in the corner of a room. And how are you going to get your manuscript picked up and read in the first place? Well, maybe they're not even reading it. So I thought I'd do a drawing and staple it to the front. And it backfired because they said, story's not so great, but hey, can we use the illustration? And can you illustrate this other writer? So that's how I became an illustrator.
And you started by covers, is that right? So there was a horror series that you were illustrating covers for. Was that your first work, or was there?
No, my first work was science fiction magazines, very small press, black and white, because they didn't have... Colour printing's fairly cheap now, but back then it wasn't. You had to do separations and stuff. So most of it was black and white, and it was just my first ever published illustration was when I was 16, and it was a robot kangaroo.
And
Nothing's changed. Nothing's changed.
And Stevie, have you got another question that you'd like to ask either Shaun or myself?
How long have you been writing for?
Well, I've been writing seriously, I guess. I've had periods of writing. So as a teenager, I was writing heaps. Like, come home from school, get out a typewriter, that dates me, and I would start, you know, writing something. And I did have a computer, so I was sort of like on that cusp of when it was starting to switch over. You know, where you had your little 5 1/4 inch floppy and all that sort of stuff, and your computer made a noise like this when it's saving something. So that's my age, and it made the same noise when it was printing something out. And then you tear the little bits off the side. That's a nice ritual. Well, I printed out my story, now I tear the little bits off the side, make a nice little pile of this shredded paper. So I was writing a lot, but then I sort of when I went to uni, I studied a variety of things, and I stopped writing fiction for a while. I started reading other people's work more, and then I fell into illustration. They became really successful for me, and so I just thought I'm a dud writer, but I can draw pretty well, so I'll focus on that. And then I got tired of illustrating other people's stories because there was stuff I wanted to do, starting with the loss thing, and I was like, I want to do a funny story, but nobody's sending me funny stories. They're sending me all this serious stuff. So I'll write my own. So that was the first one that I wrote.
And the lost thing's hilarious.
It is. It's a laugh a minute.
It's quite... No, it's kind of...
The first draft was really funny.
It's kind of quietly, quirkily humorous.
Yeah. Well, it is. I find it amusing. I look at it. I think it's a funny book.
Yeah.
And that was quite liberating. But I learnt so much from working with other writers. I think that's what I should say. It wasn't like, damn these other writers, or more like, thanks writers. Now I've learned enough that I have the confidence to actually do. Picture book's quite a hard thing to do, and I figured out how to do it after the third one with another writer.
Yeah, right. And Keely, did you find that was your experience, that when you were working on other people's work, because you said you do like to write stories too, what did that teach you about your own writing?
It taught me that you always got to double check, because I normally check once and then I'm like, blur.
Yeah, we understand that. Yeah. Sean's all blur all the time.
Yeah. It's like, let the editor at the publisher deal with that. I'm done.
Yeah, but I also realised other people, like young people, they do that as well, and then the editors have a lot of work to do by checking the spelling, the grammar, the vocabulary. So,
as I have a question for you, as editors, was there any sort of times when you read a story and it wasn't just like vocabulary, grammar, but you just thought, okay, I really like this story, but it could be improved by changing some bits, like in the actual story? And then how do you actually tell that to the writer?
Well, we couldn't. I think we were told we weren't allowed to change any parts of the story. We just had to edit them, checking the spelling. But I would have liked to change some of the story's lines, because it was a bit this. So she went to the shops, not explaining what happened during that time.
Yeah, sure.
So did you find that gave you some ideas for your own writing?
Yes, not just straight, flat out facts. You want a bit of a description, describing what happens before the actual facts, and not dead-on facts.
Yeah. Yep. And how about you, Stevie? What was your experience like? Do you like to write stories? Because I know Keely does, but you haven't said that yourself yet.
I do, but when it comes to editing other people's work, I get really annoyed.
You have no idea?
Yeah.
But you were working with a team, right? So
yes.
How did the team... So I know that there were... How many people?
13.
So 13 editors, school-age editors?
No, 12,
and you also had...
But there
12.
was one mentor.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And so tell me a little bit about the role of the mentors, or the people that because I know sometimes you had people come in also when you were to do workshops from publishing houses, or authors came in to chat to you about... Can you tell me a little bit about what that was like?
It was pretty good. They told us all about what it's like to be an editor. And
did it put you off?
No. But they just gave us tips on what to do and what not to do.
Mm-hmm. Can you remember any of those tips?
I can't really remember.
That's all right.
Yeah.
But that was helpful. So they gave you some ideas. So it's not like you had one story that you had to work on your own. You could share it around amongst you. Is that your experience?
Yeah, at least 3 people edited one story, and then Amali and Veronica and Sam, they judged, they put an average score out of them, and then we decided whether it was good enough for the magazine.
And were there disagreements? Did you find that there was some? Yeah, I can imagine.
Lots of them.
Have you ever been on a judging panel, Sean, where you had to do this? It's hard, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
How did you guys work that out?
The bossiest person wins. And I'm not that person. Just quietly wait for the next round. No, sometimes I can be bossy too. I think...
quietly assertive.
Well, I was on jury duty once, and I elected myself head of the spokesperson for the jury, and everyone was relieved because they didn't want to do it. But I ended up just... and I think this is good advice for editors too. I sort of was constantly saying to the jury, look at the evidence, slamming them. Because they're always going, what if the accused was thinking this, and what if he was doing this? And that's not our job, folks. We're just here to say, is there enough evidence,
So how do you translate that to stories?
Well, being objective.
Yeah.
You just got to be really objective. So you got your opinion, okay, but you got to also, and that's being a good writer and illustrator as well. It's not about self-expression. It's about, you do a bit of that, but then you step back and you imagine what it's like for someone who's not you to read this stuff, and that's when you go through the process of, that kill your darlings thing, where you've got favourite bits, and sometimes you have to cut them out because deep down you know that they're favourite for personal reasons, and other people might not get them. So you just got to cut them out, and so you got to be, and that's the scientific thing again. You just got to be really quite cool.
Get that scalpel out. Yes.
Yeah. Just focus on the facts.
On the facts.
Yeah. So yeah, but it's difficult. Yeah, and back to that thing about working collaboratively. Yeah, it's tough. But I've always found that you know, when you've got a product, so in any collaboration, there's a bunch of people, but there's also another person, which is the thing, and that's the boss. So the film is the boss, or the book is the boss. We can always defer to the film or the book, and usually they tell everybody the same kind of thing. So that's helpful.
And did you find that, girls, when you were working on this, that because there was a theme, that helped you choose some of the stories?
Yes, definitely.
One of the things that I found when I was reading through the stories is that technology feels like quite a scary thing in here.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the stories, there are quite a few cats, but they tend to be half human, half robot.
Yeah.
And technology feels like it's something quite menacing and quite threatening.
Yeah.
So was that because that's how you feel towards technology, or that just created the most exciting stories? Is that... I forgot to say, everybody turn their phones off. There's technology. So is that how you helped choose the themes of the stories? Did you want something that felt a little bit menacing, or is that just how they
We
came
didn't really
across?
mind it. Just people just had their own imagination and just thought, oh, technology's all bad and everything. But we thought it would actually be mainly about like the improvement of technology
In the past.
So in the past, like when the creation of the wheel, and then moving on forward and forward and forward.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And then like what it was like in the future. They did do some people did stories about like in the future, which I found much more interesting than the scary ones. But
But it's
also-
interesting you point out that the wheel is also technology too. That's a really good observation, that it's not always futuristic, is it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because technology, we thought technology doesn't always mean like hoverboards and robotic cleaning devices
I need one of them.
and stuff like that. But we thought more people would write about the past, what technology was like in the past, but we were completely wrong.
Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? And
Yeah.
Shaun and I were joking before that when we were your age, we thought by now surely we'd be using hoverboards and in
Yeah.
spacesuits.
Yeah.
So we were wanting to ask you, maybe you can say, what do you think technology will be like when you're our age?
Much more different.
Mhm.
There will be more advanced things, like you don't even have to talk into a microphone. You don't need, I don't know, something that is better and improved, and you don't even need to do anything. So, like, an invisibility cloak, I don't know, something.
Cool. Because you need a lot of imagination to come up with technology, don't you? And we were talking a little bit about that, that's the overlap really between science and art and technology, that it is about imagination and creativity, imagining what could happen and what people would want. What do you think in 20 years' time would be the best piece of technology, Shaun?
Best, I don't know, but I think it'll become increasingly biological.
Okay.
I came that close to studying genetic engineering at university because I felt that then in the 90s, early 90s, that's what it would be, and it's kind of shaping up that way. I mean, we're using these computers and stuff, but compared to this computer, they're primitive, you know, so we'll be growing things, and that's a bit scary, to be honest.
Yeah, I guess if it's out of control, it could be used to grow good
When
things
it can
too.
replicate, self-replicate, and self-replicating things. That's the future, folks.
And how about you, Keely? What do you imagine in 20 years' time could be?
I remember, I think there will be more advanced technology, like Stevie said. There'd be like sensors everywhere that picked up anything that you wanted to say or do.
So we wouldn't even have to talk. We would just sit here like this, and you'd all know what we were saying, and
Yeah.
that would be cool.
Yeah, and they'd probably have small devices that you could get implanted in your brain that would
Oh,
make
yeah.
you see telepathically.
Yeah.
So,
I'd say almost certainly there'll be
Yeah.
something implanted in your brain.
Is there another question on your paper that you prepared that you'd like to ask? Have you got one there, Stevie?
What made you want to become a writer?
What made me want to become a writer? I think we used to move around a lot as children, and my mum, who's in the audience, would supply us a lot of books to read when we were in hotel rooms, because this is before the technology that we have today. So we didn't have iPads or Game Boys or anything like that. And we were often in countries where there wasn't even English programming on the television, so we would read a lot of books, and when we'd run out of books to read, she would give us pencils and paper, the ultimate technology, and we would make our own books. And that's pretty much how I started, probably younger than you, and I just haven't stopped reading stories, writing stories. And you might find this, that sometimes when you're reading a really great story, it makes you inspired to write your own story. You imagine yourself in that place or how you might do something differently.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I started. That got me excited about doing it. And I always just did it for the fun, because it was something that I loved to do, and I never imagined that it was something that I could do for a job. I always thought a job was something you put a suit on in the morning and you went out at 9 o'clock and came home at 5 and complained about your day. I didn't think a job could be something that you were really passionate about and were going to do no matter what. So I think I feel really fortunate that the thing that I love to do most is also my job. And have you got another question there that you'd like to ask?
When is Billy B. Brown's birthday?
Oh, goodness. When is her birthday? Well, I started writing Billy B. Brown in 2009, and she first came out in April 2010. So I wouldn't say 2010 because that would make her only 5. She's a little bit older than that now, but I do say April is probably her birthday.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll go with that one. Have you got another question there? Well, you were going to talk a little bit. I thought this was a really interesting topic, so we've got some of your questions here, and this is one that you told me you were chatting about a little bit on the train, about how you think that there's something interesting about young people writing for young people. So you were thinking that perhaps more teenagers should write for a younger audience, and essentially, in a way, this isn't so much teenagers. You guys aren't quite teenagers, but it is young people writing for young people. What is it that you think that a younger person understands about writing for young people that perhaps us oldies don't? What do you think would be a benefit for someone young writing for young people?
I think a benefit for someone young writing for young people would be that they are closer to like our age. So I don't want to be rude or anything.
Be
but I think adults have forgotten a bit what it's like to be a child. So they can't exactly relate enough to realise what it's like. So
I feel quite insulted now. No.
Yeah, I'm leaving right
But
now.
often, but Shaun and I have joked before that sometimes when you write for children, it's almost like you're stuck at a certain age. You know, we did this joke once where I said, "How old are you, Shaun?" I think you said you're 11 or something like that. And there sometimes does come a place in writing for children, when you're a children's author, where you have a particular part of your memory that's really accessible. So for me, I think it might be about 6 to 10 that I feel like I can remember that age really clearly. My teenage years are a bit of a blur, but 6 to 10 I can remember quite clearly. And it's not so much what I did, but it's the way that I felt when I was doing those things. And so that's where I always try to begin as a writer for children. I start from the inside out. So rather than looking at what children are doing today, I think, how did I feel when I was doing that thing? And then I try to make it relevant and put some modern technology in so I don't sound too old-fashioned. But it's an interesting point, and there are some really great writers who've started writing as teenagers. One of my favourite books when I was growing up is a book by S.E. Hinton, and it's called The Outsiders, and she started writing that when she was about 16. Sonia Hartnett as well started writing when she was very young. And so I can definitely see there is that connection, I think, when you are just writing for someone that's quite close in age to you.
Yeah.
And what do you think? Do you think there's an advantage of children writing for children or teenagers writing for teenagers?
Yes, because it's just, I don't know how to explain it, but it's just right, I guess.
Well, maybe they can understand the way that you think in a way that, is it sometimes the adults around you feel frustrated because they might not understand how you feel?
Yeah.
I'll tell you a secret. sometimes when I see my children doing naughty things, I want to laugh because the child in me thinks that's hilarious. And then I have to remember that I'm the adult and the parent, and I have to respond as the adult or the parent. Shaun, you've got a little girl now as well. Do you find that you're having to make that switch, that sometimes you can relate to her as a child and sometimes you need to be the adult?
A little bit, yeah. And yeah, you're just trying to suppress your laughter.
That just encourages them, then it's out
being
of
stern.
control.
Yeah, but I really take that point because I think it's true that as you get older, it's a real struggle to remember what it's like to be younger. Sometimes when I read books or something, I'm reminded, like even reading some of these stories, I was reminded, that would have, I'm too distant now to get into it fully, but I recognise some memory of that kind of storytelling. And it's got different structure, different interests and different emotional charge than the sort of stuff that I do now. I have very different interests now. But the most we can do as adults is find ways to remember, and writing is a good way because it's a bit like dreaming. Like when you're creative writing, your mind wanders and that allows you to remember things. It's very hard to remember things consciously, and for me drawing is much more effective. So all this stuff comes out when I'm drawing that connects me to memories of the past when I was a teenager or a kid, which I wouldn't be able, sitting here talking, I wouldn't be able to get to them. But if I start drawing stuff, I can get to them. So that's where creative work is really helpful. But I remember as a kid thinking, man, these adults don't have a clue. Look at this CBC shortlist. It sucks. It's like, these books, we don't want to read these books. And now I'm on that shortlist. Don't know what to think about it.
Every year.
Yeah.
And what do you think about that? Should we start with you, Stevie? Because that's an interesting, it's an interesting thing to bring up, because we do have Children's Choice Awards and we have awards that have been chosen by a group of adults. Do you find that they are the same or are they different? For example, the books that an adult might give you to read, are they different to the ones that you might choose for yourself?
Yes.
How is that?
Because personally, I don't like novels. I don't like long books. I like the short and funny ones with lots of animations. I just find the long books boring.
La 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 la.
You'll like my stuff then. I don't do long books.
He's got heaps of drawings in his, yeah. And so do you like reading comics?
Yes.
Yeah. And so what is it about the longer books? Do you find that you just lose interest, or is it that you can't see the story happening when you read it, whereas when it's combined with pictures it helps you see the story a little bit better?
I can see the story, definitely, but it's just that I can already tell what's going to happen. So if it's like the man goes around with a knife, what's he going to do? And then
Not chop up his vegetables, that's for sure.
probably going to kill someone, so yeah.
Yeah, and you're right, because there are often rules that are set up within storytelling that, there is a very famous rule in playwriting that says if you see a gun in Act 1, it has to go off in Act 3. So you're right, sometimes those things, if they're not used well, can feel predictable, and movies can be a little bit the same, can't they? Like, I've seen this story before. So yeah, it's up to you to write them then, isn't it?
Yeah.
Can I ask at this point what, if you could name a favourite books at the moment, or something that you've read that's really
Not
loved?
boring.
Yeah, not boring.
It's not really a book. Is it okay if it's a manga?
Yeah, sure.
Karikano.
Which one? Say it again.
Karikano.
Karikan?
Yeah.
And so what's that about?
It's about Yukino. She loves. She wants to be at the top of everything. She needs to be on top of studying, of sports festivals, of cultural festivals, of everything, and she wants to get praised, be praised. And another guy, I can't remember his name, but he's natural, and he wants to be on top of everything as well. So, but then he steals the top, and she gets angry and doesn't like him. And they fall in love, and then Yeah.
I saw that one coming.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like having a knife. It's like they hate each other. Well, then what's going to happen?
That's
Fall in
right.
love.
And Keely, you were saying you're reading the Harry Potter books at the moment. So what are some of the things that you do? You find long books okay?
Yes,
Yeah.
long books I love.
What are you drawn to in the books you choose?
I'm drawn to more series of like mystery novels, because I find every time you turn the page, it's like every time you get to the end of a page, oh, I need to read the next chapter, and then the next, and then the next, and then the next. So I find it really intriguing that there's a series of books that is about magic, and a boy called Harry who lost his parents to Lord Voldemort.
You guys should try it. It's fantastic. And do you like it that when you're in a series, it's like you're in a world that you begin to know very well, so when you pick up another book, you go back into that world again?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great too.
And I also like reading similar books, like that are not by the same author, but that are sort of related into the same topic.
Can you think of an example?
Not on the top of my head.
Do you mean something, say, like the Goosebumps series or the
Yeah.
Our Australian Girl series,
Yeah.
or something where there are lots of different
Yeah.
writers writing the same
Yeah.
things? Yeah, that's good. So you kind of know what to expect when you come to the book.
Mm.
So you like something that's a little bit more predictable.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. It's interesting, isn't it? It doesn't matter whether you girls are 12, is that right?
Yes.
12 or
12.
you're younger than me, I think, Shaun. But you know, sometimes you feel really like reading a particular kind of thing, and other times you prefer something that's a little bit more got more visual storytelling in it as well.
Yeah.
What about you, Shaun? What kind of things do you like to read? Do you read? You were saying when you were younger, you liked to read a lot of science fiction.
Yeah. When I was your age, I was reading those Choose Your Own Adventure books a lot. Partly because they were cheap. They were like the first books that I kind of bought a lot of, because they were $2 or something on a little rolly spinny thing at the newsagents. And mystery stuff, like crime stuff, like weird little fantasy Twilight Zone-y type things. I actually got heavily into reading through TV, which is interesting.
Right.
So I don't have bad things to say about TV for that reason. It was old reruns from the 1960s, the Twilight Zone, that got me heavily into reading, because I just, there's very, very articulately written, those series, like the language is quite complex, and I just thought they were hardly ever run, and I was like, where can I find more stories like this? So I went to a public library and I asked a librarian, and she said, oh, that's science fiction, which it's not really, but she gave me a little bookmark, and there were different ones. It was like romance, history, science fiction, and then it just had alphabetical listings of writers. And I started reading Asimov, and then I got to Ray Bradbury, and I pretty much didn't get further than that. I read everything that Ray Bradbury wrote, and my stories are a bit like Ray Bradbury's stories now. Like, it's almost left a stain on my imagination. So even if I try to, but then I moved on to like magic realism and, you know, some South American writers and so on, and that kind of is in the same vein, but a little bit different. So Haruki Murakami, people like that.
Which is, in a lot of your illustrations, it is a real world, just with one strange element in it a lot of the time, isn't it? Which I think is a lot about that kind of field of writing.
I wrote a story recently and it had no strange elements in it, and it felt weird.
Yeah.
It's just like about a single mother and daughter and the cat that they adopt, and I was like, man, this is so weird. Nothing bizarre happens.
So it was interesting, you mentioned Choose Your Own Adventure, because we've got a few more minutes before we open up to questions, and you girls were saying that at the launch of Early Harvest on Saturday,
Yes.
that you did a Choose Your Own Adventure with the audience, and you were
Yes.
saying that you'd be game to do that with this audience. Do you want to
Yes.
give it a go?
Yes.
What do we need to do to get the audience involved in a Choose Your Own Adventure?
Well, we will start off at the start, and then they
They get to choose
which
the
one.
next step?
Yeah.
All right. So do you need a book to read? Have you
Yes.
got one next to you? Do you want to grab this one? You can pass it last.
Oh, that's the second time.
Oops.
So we might need the mics for this, do we? So does somebody put their hand up, or do you just take a vote?
Put your hand up.
Hand up? All right.
Vote.
Vote, okay.
So put your hand up for a vote.
Great.
You wake up and get out of bed. Everything is totally normal. Do you A, go make breakfast, or B, jump out the window?
So put your hand up for A, go make breakfast. Oh,
Wow.
one
Brave
person.
yes.
We'll go for B, jump out the window.
Okay.
Is that the end already?
No.
We keep going. So we have jumped out the window. Right. What
You
happens?
stumble upon a time machine in your backyard. You step inside and see two buttons. One is labelled future and one is labelled past. Which do you choose? A, past, or B, future?
So A, past. Ooh, and B, future. Ooh,
Okay.
future, I think
Future.
wins. Yep, all right.
Okay. This is how it ended last time.
So
It's
predictable.
so predictable. Yeah.
Sorry, the labels on the buttons were switched to tricky. You go to the past instead. Go to...
Yes.
Unfortunately, you go way too far into the past. You find yourself in a castle in the 18th century. You discover that you look like a member of the royal family who earlier that very day fell off a cliff. So the royal family think that you're part of their family and let you live in their castle. You win because you're rich now, but you're stuck there forever. So you also kind of lose. Sorry. The end.
And Stevie, can we get you to do one as well? Would you be happy to do that?
Yeah.
Because we've got a little bit of time. I reckon we could do one more.
The moral of the story is just make breakfast, people.
That's right. Don't jump out the window.
I think we should make breakfast next time.
Okay. The cyborgs get offended. They. Oh wait, no. Sorry, that's
I like
the
that
end.
We
beginning.
can start from there.
It's a great way to start a story.
Oh, I don't know where
Well, a
to
lot of
start.
writers say you should know
Where
the
do I
end
start?
when you
Yeah.
start a story, but that's quite literal. Are you happy to do it, Stevie? Or would you
Yeah,
like
I
to?
just don't know where the page is.
Correct.
Just to just as an aside, once I was on a Virgin flight and they all sort of party atmosphere on this plane, and they said, okay, we're going to write a story, on a piece of paper, and we'll just pass it back along the rows. And it was like, once upon a time there was a happy ogre and he loved ice cream and roller skates. It got to me. Unfortunately, he didn't realise he was in dire trouble because some terrible was going to happen to him. And then went to the next person. They read it all out at the end, and it said, but that didn't matter. So he went and got some ice cream. And I was like, folks, that's why I'm a writer. You're not.
You have to make things happen. All right, here's the next Choose Your Own Adventure.
You yell, "Look over here!" which distracts the robots long enough for the animals to escape. Unfortunately, it turns out the robots were only trying to kill the animals because the animals were evil and trying to take over the world. The animals enslave you and force you to be a cat's pet couch forever. The end.
Oh, that was very true. Very good. That's an adventure chosen. Do you want to read one more piece? Yeah, go ahead.
By turning off your phone, you get rid of the pixel monster. Well done. Unfortunately, you also get rid of yourself because you're inside the phone at the time you die.
Sorry, guys, all dead. So, I'm sure you have some questions of these fantastic editors. You might have some questions of Shaun and I as well. First of all, can we give our young editors a great hand, warm hand of applause? Because it is a nerve-wracking thing to do, to get up and sit in front of a microphone. And we were saying if you feel nervous, you just find someone in the audience that looks like they're listening and concentrate on them. That's our tactic. All right, so can we open up to some questions? No questions.
Don't be shy.
Don't be shy. All right, there's a couple of...
Yes.
Yes.
All right, next question.
Only yes/no questions, please, folks.
To the young boy in the front.
Inspired you to edit these stories? What inspired you to edit those stories?
What inspired you to edit those stories?
Probably because we had to.
Did you feel inspired by editing the stories?
Yes.
Yeah. How were you inspired? Does it make you feel like reading more, writing more, becoming an
Reading more.
editor? Yeah.
Reading
How about
more.
yourself?
It just made me proud to be a part of it.
Yeah, that's a great thing. to
Would
be.
you do it again? Like,
Yes,
okay,
definitely.
Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty
If I
high
had
praise.
the opportunity to.
Or you
But
just have to put your
different
name in the
topic.
bag again.
Yes.
Different topic though.
Different topic.
Bit-
What topic
bit-
would you choose next?
Not sure.
Yeah, how did you pick the theme? We didn't actually
Oh,
ask
yeah.
that.
We wrote some ideas down for some themes, and then we did a vote on what
Okay.
theme we wanted, and we did we shut our eyes and went.
Right.
It's all very random, isn't it?
It's like a choose your own
And
adventure.
we all chose technology, and then
But now we're bored of it.
halfway through we got sick of the theme. We just hated it.
Yeah, that's how
Does
you
it-
know you're in the world of publishing.
Yeah.
and getting sick of it. You're a professional then.
There's actually a really lovely editorial or techitorial by Maxine Beneba Clark, where she does say, so I don't know if she's in the audience. Are you here, Maxine? She does say, it took a long time, there were a lot of submissions, and by the end we were a bit tired of the theme, but that was always going to happen, and we still had fun.
Yeah,
That's good to
very
know.
frank.
Any more questions? We'll give you the microphone so you can be heard. It's just next to you.
Do you get to choose an edit next year, or is it a new group of people?
It's a new group of people.
How do they decide?
We're in different schools, so we don't actually know what happens.
So my understanding is that 100-Story Building contacts some of the schools that they work with, and then they invite the schools to choose students. I'm looking at Lachlan in the audience. He's no. Is that the right process? Yeah. So their schools that 100-Story Building has a relationship with already, and they invite them to pick up their editors. So some of them might just be randomly pulled out of a hat. Lachlan, you've got something to add to that?
Yeah. I mean, you pretty much got it there, Sally. So we've got a relationship with hi everybody. We've got a
Lachlan's one of
relationship.
the founders of 100-Story Building.
Yeah. A relationship with a bunch of local schools around sort of the Footscray area. And we speak to the teachers as well as families who we work with in our afternoon programs and other sort of service organisations that we work with. We get referrals of families through there as well. So, the editorial committee sort of comes through to us in lots of different ways. And even with Stevie, who sort of got her name got pulled out of the hat, we then have conversations around actually, is this something you want to do, and are you engaged in this process to make sure that it's not something we're forcing anybody into, because they do get to that sort of halfway point where you get sick of the theme and technology, which is all a part of that professional process. But if anybody has anybody in their life, a young person who is interested in these kinds of programs, we're always there's a bunch of other stuff that's going on as well. So we're always willing to and happy to have people sort of come to us with questions and see if there's anywhere we can fit you in.
And Lachlan and Jess will be at the back of the room at the end, is that right, to answer any more questions around 100-Story Building? And don't forget to pick up your copy of Early Harvest today. And you can get any of us to sign it. There are a few people who've been involved also who'd be happy to sign it. I think we've got time for a couple more questions. Someone in the back there.
What would be your top tip for editors doing the magazine next year? And also, what would be your tip for someone who's post-teenage who might have to do some editing in the next little while?
Is there anyone you want to direct that question to in particular?
Both of them. I'd be interested in from both people.
Okay. So what would you recommend to next year's editors that would be help them not get too bored? What would be your top tip?
My top tip would be just focus on people's work. Don't get too distracted by everybody else arguing around you. But enjoy it. Don't feel like you're getting rushed. Just take your time, especially when you're editing, because other people think, oh, they did such a bad job of editing because they didn't do it properly, blah, 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 blah. So take your time and just go for it. If you get the opportunity, just go for the opportunity.
And you were saying you feel quite proud now that you've been a part of this magazine, so I can imagine at some stage it might have felt like hard work, but when it's all finished, it's something you can be quite proud of.
Yeah.
What tips would you give to future editors?
For my top tip, I would say you have to be socializable. You have to talk. You have to be nice to everyone. Otherwise, everyone will leave you out and won't be friends with you.
It's a good tip. And did you make some friends through
Yes.
this
Yes.
experience? Great, because it's lots of people coming from lots of different schools, isn't it? So it's a good way to meet other people. What would be your tip, Shaun, about really getting through that editing process? Because it can be quite grueling.
I think, well, as you said, that it's social, because that makes things a lot easier. It's hard doing stuff on your own. A lot of, writing and painting is solitary, and the relief comes from the fact that you often have a publisher that you can talk to, or if you're working on a film like an animated film, that's really hard and tedious and really boring work most of the time, but because of your group and if you're friends, that helps. But you don't have to be. You just have to, be on the same wavelength and be able to talk about things. So it's like most things in life. It's easier not to do it alone.
And there was another part to your question too, wasn't there, about teenagers writing for teenagers? Is that correct? Sorry, I missed.
No, the first part was advice for the editors for next year, but then the other question was editor advice for someone who's post-teenage.
Grown-ups.
Grown-up, yeah, one of those, who might have to start doing some editing. Was there any different advice you might give them or another insight you might have?
All right, so maybe a way to frame that is, what are things that you think that us adults working in the field and publishing and writing for children could know? What would be something really good for us to know to make these books more interesting for you?
Maybe search on the internet what kids are into at the moment.
Yeah, it's a good tip.
Well,
yes.
I have to say there's surprisingly little of that research in the children's literature world. It's like, you go to often a children's literature event, and one of the most, it's a children's literature event because there's no kids. So it's a children's literature event. It just happens to be the case that way in book festivals and so on. There's very few kids. I once went to a science fiction convention and I was on a panel, much like this, with some students who are your age, and it was adults in the audience just asking them, what do you like? And the adults are really interested because it's the first time we'd really looked at this, and it was very revealing.
So listening to kids, perhaps.
Yeah, I think so.
Not just talking at them.
Yeah, or imagining what kids like, because they're right there, it's not hard to find out.
And what do you think? You've got a particular interest in manga, but if somebody was going to write the perfect book for you, what would that look like?
Very small.
As in that size? Or
It's like a square, like very small.
Physically small book, yeah.
You've done a couple of small ones, I think.
I have. I've got one you'd like. It's
Yeah. Great. Anything else you'd like to add to that?
No, not really.
See, this is what publishers should be doing, just really tiny books.
Any other questions from the audience? Someone over there.
Now that you've had experience editing, when you go back to the classroom, are you considered experts? And do you help your friends with their writing?
Good question.
Not really. I'm more focused on my own writing.
So are you writing something at the moment, or are you writing lots of different
Yes,
things?
a personal piece for our portfolio at the end of the year.
And here's a question for you. I sometimes found at school, when I was asked to write something in school, it never felt as fun as something that I would just write myself. Or even if I was asked to read a book for school, it was never as fun as the one I might choose myself. Is that something you find as well?
Yes.
Definitely.
And do your teachers, I've noticed when my sons even were in high school, that they gave them the opportunity to write about books in a format that Shaun and I might be more familiar with, like a standard book review, but also some of them were allowed to make films, short films, some of them could do posters, some of them could do comics. Do you feel that there's a little bit more freedom in the way that you can choose the books that you want to read, or the way that you talk about books now? It's hard for you to compare, I know,
Yes.
but what's the most interesting way for you to engage with a book? Do you think if you had to read a book for school and explain what the book was about, what would be the most interesting way for you to explain that?
A poster would be easy, but a film...
And small. Yeah.
Yes. But a film would be hard, but it would be more fun and interesting to look at.
How did you find when you had a book that was pretty finished? I mean, it was completely finished as a book. What made you want to then translate that to a film? So The Lost Thing became a film. What was it that film could do that a book wasn't able to do?
Sound was the big thing. It wasn't so much the movement, it was the sound. Because we don't, in our medium that we've chosen, we don't have a lot of music coming out of the book. And
there's an opening.
Yeah.
Books with CD.
Need little chips in the books. Yeah. Oh wait, there's an iPad. That'd be annoying actually, reading a novel and the author puts in their freaking soundtrack on it. That'd be terrible.
Someone doing a fart noise there.
Yeah, it was the idea of sound, to actually hear the lost thing, ring the bells and the grinding of it getting up out of the sand, and just little things like that. Really, I found that was an exciting idea, and just that sensory world, It doesn't work for all stories. Some stories are best left open. You don't want to make the sensory world for the reader. You want them to do it. But in some stories, you have such a clear idea about the dreamscape of the world that you want other people to share that in all its detail. And so those are, worth adapting. I wouldn't adapt every story.
And Keely, you're reading the Harry Potter books at the
Yes.
moment. Do you read the book before you see the film, or are you happy to do it either way?
Read the book before I see the film.
And have you seen any of the films now?
Yes, so far I have seen the first, the second and the third.
And how do you feel that the film is compared to the book? Do you think it adds something or takes something away from
I
the
think it takes lots of things away, because with the Harry Potter books, especially the Order of the Goblet of Fire, it has lots of detail in the book, but then when they put it on screen, I don't think they're able to get as much detail from the book as in the movie.
It can be limited, can't it? And sometimes when you're reading a book, you can go into the characters' heads in a way that you're not necessarily able to do in a film too. Yeah, great. And one last question I think can probably do.
Can you tell us a bit about how you worked with adults through the process, if you did at all, and how they related to you, like whether they were a bit bossy or not?
Do you want to start, Stevie?
No, not really.
They weren't. They weren't bossy. So, was there a particular adult that you found worked in a way that you found really helpful? Was it the authors coming in to talk, or the editors coming to talk, or I think there's someone in the audience who worked quite consistently with you? What was most helpful for you?
I don't know. They were all really helpful. Veronica, Sam, and Amali, and Lachlan. All of those four people helped us the most. Yeah.
And what was it that they did that you felt particularly helpful? Were they giving you ideas, or just?
They helped us lead the way, but they didn't take control. They let us do it ourselves.
Great. So you can look at this and feel like it really was your team that put it together with just the adults on the side.
Both. Yeah.
Great. And how about you? What was that experience like for you?
I think it was just no adults bossing us around. We sort of not ruled it, but we sort of did a lot of the things by ourselves. But the adults did encourage us. If we were stuck on a word or something, they helped us decide what we were going to say or like write.
Great. Well, I think the 100-story building is pretty much a bossy adult-free zone, really, isn't it? And I think you find the same in the Early Harvest magazine.
Yes.
So we have to wind up there. Can we once again thank our wonderful panel and come out the back and say hello? So thank you.